So this section is going to be an introduction to human perception, and I'm going to try and stick within the realm of evolution and biology. However, that is going to be difficult because much of this can be interpreted psychologically. You can even perhaps bring it into the religious domain a little bit, but I'm going to try my best to keep the thoughts Darwinian and based on survival. So that's what I'll be doing. So I start off by saying humans are strange creatures. We see the world like no other creature. We are conscious of ourselves, of our birth, life, and death. But there is a problem. When we see the world, we do not see its entirety. So when we look around at the world, there is a whole field of information. There's a whole field of data, and that's true scientifically because DNA is information and things of that sort. So when we look around, there's a whole field of information, and we see it at only one level at which it could be perceived, right? If we have a telescope and we view another planet, or if we go to space and we view Earth, we see Earth in its entirety. And as you're going back, then you can see, as you're going back to Earth in the space shuttle, while you're in the atmosphere, you can see the continents, and then you can see the countries, and then the cities, and then the towns, and eventually you've landed. And then when you get there, then you see the level that everybody else sees at. You could call it the human level or whatever, where you're on the ground. But then you can get smaller than that. So there's like an infinite complexity upward and an infinite complexity downward. And we stay often at one of those levels. That's just the way we see the world. Of course, we can go to a mountain, but we can't really get smaller, right? So there's limits, but there is variation, but there's still limits. Okay, so there's this huge world, and there's all these levels of complexity, but we only see a small slice of it. So we only see a small portion of the world. And although we may see enough to be able to act to survive in the world, we do not take everything into account all at once. There's simply too much there to constantly keep in our brain at once. Even our eyes are like that. Whenever you look at something, I mean, it looks like you're seeing the world around you and at this complex level of detail, but you're actually not. It's just the one thing you're looking at. That's where the complexity's at. The other stuff is just made from images where you've already glanced at it, or it's just in the corner of your eyes. And even there, you can only see in black and white, just enough to be able to detect change or predators, but not enough to see it in its complexity. So this is a sacrifice, because by looking at this camera, I'm sacrificing looking at this water bottle, or sacrificing looking at my bathroom. I'm focusing my attention on this, and I'm sacrificing other possibilities. So it's a sacrifice. We must choose our sacrifices, or at least we can choose them. I mean, we do them unconsciously, and so in that sense, it's not a choice, but we can consciously change what we are looking at and what we are sacrificing. We must set a goal or an aim and move towards it. So humans do this all the time. We set goals all of the time. We will then see things in the world as meaningful in relationship to our goal. So now I'm going to give an example of that. If our goal was to find water, then when we arrive at a river with fish in it, the fish will not be of as much interest as the water. So even though we need fish to survive, even though they're vital to our survival, of course we can eat other things, but the fish we could eat to quench our hunger. But if we're not hungry and we're thirsty, then the water's more important than the fish. It doesn't mean the fish isn't important. It's not important to the goal of finding water, of getting water to drink, but it is important for other goals, right? So finding water is a subset of surviving, and eating fish is a subset of surviving, but they're two different goals. And those two different goals, if they're your only goal or your primary goal, the world is meaningful in different ways. Different things have different meanings, or no meaning, or they're irrelevant, or they're a stumbling block, or they're helpful, depending on what your primary aim is. Okay, so let's see. If our goal was to find water, then when we arrive at a river with fish, the fish will not be of as much interest as the water. However, if we are hungry and we approach the same river, the water will not be of as much interest as the fish, at least not for the purpose of drinking. Obviously, fish need water to survive, and so technically it's still meaningful, but you don't see the river as a place to quench your thirst. You see the river, specifically the fish, as a way to quench your hunger. So it has a different meaning, it has a different value to it. So even though we approach the same river, its meaning is different because our goal is different. This is how human perception or conscious perception functions. We have a goal or set of goals, and we see the meaning in things in accordance with that goal or set of goals. So there is this idea that meaning and value isn't scientific. You can't really find the value of things scientifically. Now that might be true, but what I think is you can do so as a scientist. You can study meaning scientifically. I think you can do that actually. And so I'll explain it further, because we're creatures and we act in the world, and our physiology prompts us to survive. It prompts us to do things to survive, and that's actually our goal. Our goal is to survive. Now, it's also to reproduce, and it's more complicated than that. And the next video is going to be about the goal. Okay, so that's the next video. But still, just say we have a goal, and let's say our goal is to find food. Okay, well that goal is like, that's a Darwinian goal, right? That's a evolutionarily beneficial goal. That's a goal that increases our likelihood of survival, unless we get eaten by a creature. But then the goal can be find food safely. So finding food safely, that's an amazing goal. That's a perfect goal in some sense, at least in terms of finding food. You can't get much better than that. Like, find food quickly and safely. Well, that's pretty good. Okay, well, you're going to see the world as meaningful or not meaningful in relationship to that. Because if your goal is not to find food, then when you see a moose or a cow, maybe you look at the cow's beauty, or maybe you admire it as a creature that evolved over time. But if you're hungry, it's not a manifestation of the beauty of life. It's a manifestation, it's food. That's what it is. It's food. And food fixes your hunger and it keeps you alive. And that's the meaning of the cow or the moose or whatever it is. Or if you see a person who's holding bread, and perhaps that person is generous. Well, if you're not hungry, you might just ignore that person. But if you are hungry and they're generous and they're like waving it around, saying that they're going to give it away for free, well, all of a sudden, that person is now a pathway to quenching your hunger. And so the meanings are different. And one, the person is somewhat irrelevant, and then the other, the person is entirely relevant. And that depends upon your aim. And so that might not have a scientific basis or foundation, but you can look at it in a Darwinian way. I think you can look at it in a scientific way. And I think it isn't an error to do that. I actually think it's pretty good to do that. And then if we accept the axiom that it's better that things exist, that it's better that life exists, that it's better that human life exists, if we accept that axiom as fundamentally true because our physiology prompts such, we evolved systems that prompt such, right? Evolution selected for the continued existence of human life, along with other things, but it's selected for the continued existence of human life. And if we're going to think evolutionarily, which some would say is scientifically, then we have to accept that principle, that human life should continue to exist. And then that's the goal. So that's the fundamental goal. You can call that a scientific goal, or the goal, or the primary goal. And then when you have that goal, things manifest themselves in a particular way that they would not manifest themselves if your goal was different than that. And so you can then study the meaning of things in relationship to that goal. And so, there's some who claim that meaning and science are in some way distinct, or that you at least cannot discover the meaning or value of things within a scientific framework, or meaning can't emerge from science alone. It has to come from someplace else. Might not actually be so true. I mean, maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about, but I think that's the primary goal, like I'm going to talk about in the next video, and I think that has a set of particular meanings that you can look at and understand, and that are somewhat universal. Of course, they might manifest themselves differently at the level of detail and each unique individual, but overall, the goal is the same. It's to reproduce.